You aren't lazy. Your undisciplined self is exiled. Carl Jung. You are not lazy. That midnight paralysis keeping you glued to the digital void is a desperate survival mechanism. You aren't just procrastinating. You are fleeing a burning building inside your own mind, silently hunted by a terrifying monster slowly devouring your soul from the inside. The paralysis of the midnight soul. The clock strikes 11, but time means nothing in this space. The room is swallowed by a deafening, heavy silence, yet inside your skull, a vicious riot is raging. A cold, spectral blue light bleeds from the screen, illuminating a face that is hollow, exhausted, and fundamentally broken. You sit there, paralyzed in an invisible quagmire, your thumb swiping mindlessly through an endless, suffocating cascade of digital void. Let us be agonizingly honest with ourselves for a moment. With every mechanical scroll, you are plunging a dagger deep into the flesh of your own self-worth. A suffocating guilt rises, twisting violently in your chest. The venom of self-resentment seeps into your very cells as the terrifying realization hits you. You have just slaughtered another day. You are trapped in the purgatory of your own procrastination, a sleepwalker incapable of shaking yourself awake from the nightmare of your creeping mediocrity. Before we descend further into this abyss to uncover the raw truth, the inner multiverse warmly welcomes you. If you have ever felt this quiet despair, this unseen internal war, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support is the vital force that allows us to continue forging these lanterns for your darkest nights. Now I ask you to stop. Stop slicing yourself open with the superficial labels handed to you by a blind and apathetic world. Society turns its arrogant back on you and brands you as lazy. Cheap, mass-produced self-help books spit on your silent struggle, calling you undisciplined, weak-willed, a defective cog in the relentless machine of modern productivity. But the truth is far more terrifying and infinitely more profound than these shallow judgments. You are not inherently lazy. The crippling paralysis you experience every time you face your work is not a measure of your uselessness. It is a symptom. It is the blaring, desperate siren of a burning psyche, an alarm that you desperately try to mute by slapping on empty, pathetic slogans of motivation. The indiscipline you feel is actually a tragic cry for help from a violently divided soul. You are not lazy. You are being torn to pieces from the inside out. We are drowning in an era that worships the cruel deity of toxic hustle culture, a vicious system that brainwashes a man into believing his spiritual worth is weighed only by the sleep he sacrifices and the blood he sweats. It forces you to rely on sheer willpower, a finite, easily depleted energy, to fight a war against your own profound spiritual decay, the terror of the unseen judge. As this spiritual decay hollows you out, the true battlefield reveals itself not in your schedule, but within the raw, bleeding core of your deepest fears. The task sitting on your desk, the unfinished essay, the unpainted canvas, the business plan collecting digital dust, is no longer just a task. It has shape-shifted into a merciless mirror, reflecting every insecurity you have ever harbored. You do not run from the work because the work is physically demanding. You run because it forces you to confront the agonizing possibility that your best might not be good enough. Modern psychology sterilized this experience by calling it an emotional regulation problem. But let us speak to the soul. It is existential terror. When you stare at the blank page, you are standing at the edge of a cliff, peering down into the abyss of your own potential failure. The smartphone, the endless scrolling, the cheap digital dopamine, these are not your masters, they are your anesthetics. They are the chemical numbing agents you use to silence the deafening voice in your head that whispers you are a fraud. We have been conditioned to believe that avoidance is a character flaw, an indulgence of the weak. Yet, look closely at your own trembling hands. You are not indulging, you are fleeing a burning building. You are attempting to protect your fragile ego from the devastating blow of inadequacy. The procrastination you hate so much is actually a twisted, desperate survival mechanism designed by a terrified inner child who would rather be called lazy than be proven incompetent. Until you recognize the sheer magnitude of this hidden terror, you will continue to fight the wrong enemy, swinging wildly at shadows while the monster of fear slowly devours your life force from the inside. It is a profound tragedy that we treat our deepest wounds with the salt of self-condemnation, failing to see that the paralyzed self is not an adversary to be conquered, but a frightened hostage pleading for rescue. The tyranny of the perfect illusion. This paralyzing fear of judgment does not exist in a vacuum. It is meticulously fed and magnified by a relentless phantom standing over your shoulder, the tyranny of perfection. We often wear perfectionism as a twisted badge of honor, a socially acceptable disguise for a soul that is slowly starving to death. But make no mistake, perfection is not a standard of excellence. It is a weapon of mass self-destruction. Inside your mind, an impossible ideal has been erected, a pristine, flawless outcome that you demand of yourself before a single step is taken. You tell yourself that if the project cannot be groundbreaking, if the execution cannot be flawless, it is better left untouched. This is the ultimate self-sabotage. You are holding your own creativity hostage, demanding a ransom of absolute certainty that the universe will never provide. The divided soul I spoke of earlier is split exactly here. One half harbors a burning, magnificent ambition to create and connect, while the other half stands as a cruel, exacting tyrant, ready to execute any effort that falls short of divinity. As you sit in the dark, paralyzed by inaction, it is because these two halves are locked in a bloody, silent war. The tyrant tells you that an imperfect attempt is a permanent stain on your worth, reducing your complex, beautiful humanity to a binary code of success or absolute failure. You are crushed beneath the unbearable weight of expectations you never consciously chose to carry. Expectations inherited from a society obsessed with the polished, filtered end result, while utterly despising the messy, humiliating process of actual growth. You mourn the masterpieces you never created, failing to realize that your obsession with the summit has made you utterly terrified of the mountain itself. The collapse of the iron will. When you are locked in this death grip with perfection, the world tells you that the only weapon you need is sheer, unrelenting discipline. We are told to wake up earlier, to grind harder, to force our minds into submission with rigid schedules and punishing routines. Yet, relying on brute willpower to solve a crisis of the soul is like trying to extinguish a roaring forest fire with a handful of sand. Willpower is a frail, finite resource, easily shattered by the emotional exhaustion you carry just from surviving the internal war. Every time you try to grit your teeth and force yourself to be productive, you are violently dragging a wounded animal by a leash. You may force out a few hours of robotic output, but the spiritual cost is catastrophic. This forced discipline creates a profound alienation from your true self. You begin to view your own mind as a hostile territory, an enemy to be beaten into compliance rather than a garden to be nurtured. The collapse of your iron will is inevitable because you cannot outwork a soul that feels entirely disconnected from its own purpose. The exhaustion you feel at the end of the day is not from physical labor. It is the absolute depletion of a spirit that has spent hours wearing a mask of competence while silently screaming underneath. You crash, you burn out, and you return to the digital void, not out of laziness, but because your psyche demands rest from the sheer trauma of self-coercion. Discipline without profound self-understanding is merely self-abuse, wrapped in a culturally celebrated package. It strips you of your inherent humanity, turning your sacred life into an endless, joyless transaction where you are forever in debt to your own unattainable ambitions. The quiet rebellion of self-compassion. To escape this cycle of exhaustion and self-harm, you must surrender the whip and learn the profound courage it takes to finally lay down your arms. The path out of the midnight paralysis is not paved with better time management apps or aggressive motivational speeches. It is forged through the quiet, radical rebellion of self-compassion. You must look at your deeply flawed, paralyzed, exhausted self and offer forgiveness instead of a verdict. Forgive yourself for the days you lost to the void. Forgive yourself for the projects that died in the womb of your mind. Understand that your worth as a living, breathing human being is not tethered to your economic output or your ability to flawlessly execute a checklist. Healing begins the moment you give yourself permission to be spectacularly mediocre. It begins when you sit down at your desk and whisper to the terrified child inside you that it is safe to make a mess. that it is safe to create something ugly, unfinished, and entirely imperfect. Reclaiming your soul means untangling your identity from the suffocating grip of toxic hustle culture and recognizing that true, lasting motion comes from alignment, not force. When you move out of love for the process, out of a gentle curiosity, rather than a frantic fear of falling behind, the paralysis begins to melt. The heavy, deafening silence of the room transforms from a prison into a sanctuary. You slowly awaken from the nightmare, not by jolting yourself with adrenaline, but by softly opening your eyes to the tragic, beautiful reality that you are simply a human being trying to find the light. And in that gentle acceptance, the midnight soul finally finds its dawn. This is not the end of your struggle, but it is the beginning of an honest truce with yourself. A sacred vow to never again trade the sanctuary of your inner peace for the applause of a blind world. Conclusion. In synthesizing these revelations, we must confront the harsh truth that our chronic paralysis is rarely a failure of discipline, but rather a profound crisis of the soul. For too long, we have waged a brutal, unwinnable war against our own minds, treating avoidance as a character flaw and wielding toxic perfectionism as a standard of excellence. We exhaust our finite willpower, dragging our traumatized psyches through punishing routines, only to collapse back into the numbing embrace of digital distractions. This vicious cycle is driven by the unseen judge, an existential terror of our own inadequacy, and the tyranny of the perfect illusion, which demands flawless outcomes before the work even begins. The true tragedy lies in how we have culturally celebrated this self-coercion, mistaking our internal cries for rescue as laziness that must be beaten into submission. However, the dawn breaks when we finally lay down our weapons and embrace the quiet rebellion of self-compassion. By untangling our inherent human worth from our productivity, we dismantle the paralyzing fear of judgment. True healing and sustainable growth do not emerge from rigid schedules or brute force, but from granting ourselves the radical permission to be messy, imperfect, and spectacularly mediocre. When we replace the frantic fear of failure with gentle curiosity, the oppressive midnight of the soul transforms into a sanctuary of genuine creation. Profound lesson. Procrastination is not a symptom of laziness. It is a desperate shield protecting a fragile ego from the terror of imperfection. Forcing yourself into motion through sheer willpower and self-condemnation only deepens the psychological wound. True, sustainable momentum is achieved exclusively through radical self-compassion and the courage to detach your inherent self-worth from your external achievements. How to apply this to your life? In your daily life, you must actively practice the permission to be imperfect. When facing a daunting task, consciously lower your initial standards. Set out to write an ugly first draft, paint a messy canvas, or create a flawed outline. Whenever the inner critic demands absolute certainty or flawless execution, counter it by reminding yourself that it is safe to make mistakes. If you find yourself doom scrolling to numb your anxiety, pause, forgive yourself immediately without judgment, and redirect your focus to the pure process of doing the work rather than obsessing over the final outcome. Prioritize gentle consistency over brutal sprints of forced discipline. Question for you: what is one specific task or passion you have been putting off simply because you were afraid the result wouldn't be perfect? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section below so we can all learn and draw inspiration from each other's journeys. If you found value in this message, please hit the subscribe button to support the channel. Your support gives us the incredible motivation we need to keep creating deep, meaningful content for you in the future.